We arrived at the lakeside vacation house in early May. The weather was still cool, with a chill in the breeze off the water. I wasn't particularly looking forward to the trip. It was Leah's idea. She said the kids were off for spring break, and it was the perfect chance for a quiet family getaway. The house was in northern Michigan, just outside a sparsely populated town. The closer we got, the weaker our phone signal became. Eventually, the GPS froze, and we had to rely on the printed map Leah had wisely prepared. When the car turned onto a gravel road, the forest grew thick around us, and the house suddenly appeared at the edge of the trees like it had just emerged from nowhere. Behind it was the lake. Trees encircled the front. It looked clean but desolate, like it hadn't been lived in for a long time. The wooden exterior was faded, and there was a tear in the awning on the second-floor balcony. No one greeted us. The key was exactly where the owner had said it would be, under the mailbox. As I bent down to retrieve it, I had the distinct feeling someone was watching me from inside the house. It passed quickly, but I'm certain I felt it. We went in. The kids ran upstairs and downstairs, picking their rooms. Leah headed to the kitchen to check the utensils. I did a quick walk-through of the place. Nothing unusual. The decor was outdated. Some wall paintings were slightly crooked, as if someone had touched them and didn't bother straightening them. The curtains were dusty, and the living room sofa sagged in the middle, but overall, it was cleaner than I expected. What bothered me most was a faint moldy smell, not strong, but definitely not from anything we brought with us. That first night, we had dinner on the balcony. Darkness came fast. The lake looked dead, completely still, with only faint ripples brushing the surface as wind passed over it. We chatted. The kids ran in and out. While cleaning up, I noticed Amy standing frozen at the balcony door, looking unsettled. I asked what was wrong. She said she saw someone walk past the back of the house, a shadow. I told her it was probably an animal. She didn't press the issue, but I couldn't sleep well that night. At around 3 a.m. I woke up, no idea why. The house was silent. Then I heard a noise downstairs. Just a single soft creak, like a floorboard being stepped on. I sat up and waited. Nothing else came. Leah was fast asleep. I got out of bed and looked down the staircase. Nothing. Just the entryway light turned on. I was sure I had turned it off before going to bed. The next morning, I asked the kids if they heard anything. They all shook their heads. Leah said it was probably just the wood expanding and contracting. I tried to believe that. We spent the day by the lake. After dinner, everyone was tired and went to bed early. But on the third night, I woke up again, this time to a much stranger sound. It wasn't creaking. It was the slow, deliberate sound of fingernails scraping along a wall. It lasted 2 or 3 seconds. I turned on the bedside lamp. The noise stopped. I walked around the house again. Nothing was out of place. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Cabinets we hadn't touched were open. One of the 3 beers I had left in the fridge was missing. The balcony door, which I had definitely locked, was slightly ajar the next morning. Leah said I probably forgot. I didn't argue. That afternoon, I stayed alone in the house and checked every corner. In the kitchen, I noticed a floorboard that looked newer than the rest. I knelt and tapped on it. It sounded hollow. I pried it open and found a hole beneath it, leading down a narrow ladder. Pitch black. I froze for a few seconds, then shone a flashlight into it. The ladder descended into a cramped space where I saw dirty blankets, an old sleeping bag, half-empty water bottles, and some used cans of food. That wasn't a storage area. Someone had been living there. I didn't tell Leah or the kids. That night, I reconnected the security cameras in the living room. The owner had said they were old, but still functional, originally installed to keep wildlife out. I told Leah to take the kids to bed early, and I stayed up watching the screen. At 1:50 a.m. I saw it. A floorboard beneath the kitchen cabinet slowly slid open. A hand emerged. Then a thin figure followed, crawling out barefoot, pressing low against the floor like he didn't want to make a sound. He moved toward the fridge, stood there a few seconds after opening it, took something, then silently crawled back, pulling the board shut behind him. I called the police immediately. They arrived 3 hours later and tracked footprints into the nearby woods. They found him under a fallen tree. His clothes were tattered. He didn't resist or speak much, just nodded and said he had been staying in the house for some time. He wasn't insane. He hadn't hurt anyone. He just didn't want to be seen. He said, "I just wanted to hide and live." I couldn't say a word. I felt like my spine was dipped in ice. We packed and left immediately. 4 days after returning home, every creak in our house set me on edge. The rustle of curtains or pop of floorboards would jolt me from sleep. That man wasn't a ghost, but he was far more terrifying. Because 4 days, he was living with us, breathing, moving, eating completely unseen. He wasn't a shadow or a legend, just a stranger, quietly, invisibly, alive in a place we thought was ours. A friend of mine recently told me about a terrifying experience she had. Every July, I take a long vacation for myself, spending time in different vacation homes around the country. Once, I traveled alone to a remote town and rented a cabin there, an old house built in the 19th century, nestled at the edge of a dense forest. The nearest neighbor was over a mile away. The cabin had an eerie kind of charm. Faded portrait paintings hung on the walls, and the air carried a faint scent of aged wood. But I noticed something strange. Locals seemed to avoid talking about the place. It was as if the cabin had a history no one wanted to revisit, a lingering presence that kept people at a distance. I'm not superstitious, so I brushed off their avoidance as folklore. It rained constantly in the first few days, casting a gloomy hue over everything, making the cottage feel even more somber. On the first night, I felt a vague sense of unease. The wind whistled through the window cracks with a low, mournful sound. Around midnight, while scrolling on my phone in bed, I suddenly heard a rustling outside, like someone walking through the forest. I turned to the window, but only saw moonlight and the swaying of tree shadows. The next day, I went into town to buy some supplies. An elderly woman asked me where I was staying. When I told her, her expression darkened, and in a low voice she asked, "Do you know what happened there?" I shook my head, and she began to tell the story. Over 100 years ago, the town accused a woman of being a witch. She supposedly cursed the land and vanished into the forest. Since then, people say they've heard her whispers and sometimes seen her figure. The story unsettled me, but I told myself it was just local superstition. That night, as I was preparing for bed, I heard footsteps outside my front door, slow, deliberate pacing. Despite my fear, I gathered my courage and opened the door. No one was there, only silence and darkness. But on the porch, I found a trail of wet footprints, circling back and forth. My heart pounded as I quickly shut the door, that uneasy feeling growing stronger. On the third night, I discovered another set of wet footprints, this time inside, leading from the front door to the fireplace. I began to question my sanity. Maybe I was just tense, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something unseen was watching me constantly, just beyond my vision. On the fourth night, the footprints appeared again, now on the wooden floor by the fireplace, leading straight to my bedroom. I stared at them, frozen in terror. That was it. I had to leave. I grabbed my phone and car keys, bolted out the door, and drove off. As I started down the muddy road, I caught a glimpse in the rearview mirror. A woman was standing in the middle of the driveway. I slammed the gas pedal. The car skidded through the mud. Her figure didn't move, just stood there, staring. The rain poured harder. Water streaked the windshield, distorting her shape, but even in the darkness, I could feel those eyes locked on me. The next morning, I drove straight to the airport. I didn't even go back for my luggage. While waiting for my flight, I opened my phone to delete the photos I had taken in the cottage. But in every photo, I noticed a blurry figure in the corner, sometimes outside the window, sometimes by the door. In the last few, she was standing right behind me. Many years ago, my co-worker Daniel suggested we take advantage of a 3-day weekend to unwind in a remote mountain town. It ended up being the four of us: me, Daniel, his sister Lucy, and her boyfriend Eric, renting a mountain villa together. The house sat midway up the mountainside, its exterior covered in ivy, with a red brick roof and wooden window frames that gave off a nostalgic, vintage feel. The villa was surrounded by thick forest, quiet and secluded. Inside, most of the decor was wooden, creating a cozy atmosphere. We decided to kick things off with a barbecue. There was food, drinks, laughter. Everyone was in high spirits. It wasn't until midnight that we finally turned in for the night. The house had 4 bedrooms. The master bedroom was the largest and most comfortable, and after a round of rock, paper, scissors, I got lucky and won it. Its window faced a dark, dense stretch of forest. Even with curtains drawn, the view felt strangely oppressive. The bathroom had an old-fashioned clawfoot tub, something that looked like it came out of another era. At the time, I didn't think much of it. I was just grateful to have a place to sleep. That night, I collapsed into bed and quickly drifted into a half-dreamlike state. But after some unknown amount of time, I was jolted awake by a strange sound, like someone trying to open the window. Click dash click dash click. Click dash click dash click. I frowned, wondering who'd be outside this late. The window should have been locked from the inside. There was no reason anyone should be tampering with it. I sat up, staring at the window, but saw nothing. The sound stopped, then changed to a soft tapping on the glass. Tap, 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 every few seconds. The kind of sound that makes your skin crawl. I lowered my voice and asked, "Who's out there?" Silence. Nothing responded except the quiet chorus of insects outside. I told myself it was probably the wind, or maybe a branch brushing against the glass. I lay back down, trying to ignore the unease clawing at me. But just as I closed my eyes, another noise crept in, this one deeper, more unnatural. I snapped my eyes open and saw the curtains slowly parting, revealing the pitch-black forest beyond. The window was still locked, yet the curtains moved as if pushed by an invisible hand. I felt a rush of cold shoot up my spine. My heart pounded violently in my chest. I held my breath, staring into the darkness outside. Suddenly, the entire bed began to shake violently, as if there was an earthquake. But worse, something heavy pressed down on my waist, pinning me to the mattress like a weight I couldn't fight. I tried to scream, but my throat was completely locked up. I couldn't make a sound. I couldn't move. My limbs were frozen, as if nailed to the bed by an unseen force. My eyes darted around in desperation, but there was nothing to see, only the darkness and a suffocating heaviness filling the room. My thoughts were a chaotic mess, and all I could do was struggle. I don't know how long it lasted, maybe seconds, maybe a minute, but finally, I managed to break free. I bolted upright, soaked in cold sweat, on the verge of a breakdown. I ran for the door, desperate to get out, but no matter how I twisted the doorknob, it wouldn't budge. It was as if it had been locked from the outside. Then the curtains suddenly slammed shut with a loud whip, plunging the room into total darkness. I heard a low, guttural laugh, a man's voice, twisted and mocking, followed by a string of words I couldn't understand. I froze, unable to move, as that eerie laughter echoed all around me. Suddenly, the doorknob turned. I threw the door open and ran straight into the living room, banging on the others' doors. But no matter how hard I knocked, none of them answered. Eventually, I curled up on the couch, shivering, and waited out the night. The next morning, Daniel saw my pale face and asked, "What happened?" "Didn't sleep well." I told him everything, and he scoffed. That's it, you're scared of that. Fine, I'll take your room tonight. He patted his chest and promised he wasn't afraid of ghosts. That night, we switched rooms. Daniel took the master bedroom, and I moved to one of the smaller ones. I thought it was over. But the next morning, when I walked into the living room, I found Daniel sitting on the couch, trembling. He looked even worse than I had the day before, ashen and terrified. In a low voice, he muttered, "There's something in that room." I asked what happened, but he just stammered, saying something had pressed down on him in the middle of the night, and that same strange, chilling laugh had echoed around the room. His eyes were wide with fear. In that moment, I knew there was something truly wrong with that villa. We packed up and left that day, driving straight back to the city. Ever since, I've never dared to set foot in places that seem peaceful on the outside, but hide something wrong underneath.